are a founder of the Susan B. Anthony list, right?
Yeah.
What's your biggest achievement?
I think I would say we're living in it right now, which is a pro-life House, a pro-life Senate, and a pro-life administration.
Hello, I'm Bonnie Orbay. Welcome to the Contrary. This week, we continue our series of interviews with women thought leaders. Our guest is Marjorie Dannenfelser, president of the Susan B. Anthony List, a political organization advancing pro-life, anti-abortion women in politics. Welcome, Marjorie.
Thank you. It's good to be with you after all these years again.
Thank you. You too. Tell us about your background, because you didn't start out as a pro-life advocate.
No, indeed. No, I was very pro-choice. I would have worn that banner and that sticker on my lapel any day. I was at Duke University, and I was very Republican, but definitely pro-choice.
And there used to be a very large contingent of Republican pro-choice women.
That's true. And I was one of them. And I really wanted, I was the co-chair of college Republicans. We had two. One was pro-life and one was pro-choice, so I was the pro-choice one. And I really believed very strongly that it was a question of my body and my choice to do with it as I wished. And I would definitely not have anyone giving me counsel or advice unsolicited. If I had gotten pregnant at that time, which I could have, I would have definitely had an abortion, and I don't think that I would have thought twice about it.
And that's fascinating intellectually now that you lead one of the most prominent, if not the most prominent, pro-life organizations. What changed?
Well, I think a lot of it had to do with, becoming a philosophy major, and then at the same time meeting people who very much disagreed with my point of view and were very good apologists for the pro-life position. And I really was raised to pursue truth. I mean, wherever it led me, that was what my parents and my background encouraged. That's what I want for my own kids. So I really, even though I was decided on this, I also had an open mind, and if you're going to study philosophy, you kind of have to, right? So I think I just got to the point, especially in conversations, where it was very hard to answer the question, what is that thing that is happening? You know, it's not an appendectomy, it's not a tonsillitis, it's not, it is a lot of, there are a lot of things that it's not. And somehow we have given that entity a lot of conversation and more value than just a part of your body that's being taken out. So what is that thing? And I had a hard time answering that, and I think that was probably what put me down the path of exploration about how to answer that. What is it? How do we all begin? And eventually I got to the point of seeing this as two patients, two people to deal with, and a human rights issue because of that.
But what role did religion play in that? Because you also changed, you converted.
I did. So during that time, it was probably part of that. You know, in college, how you think you've got to get everything settled, you know, you got to know what you believe, you got to rush to get to that. I was very much in that mode, and I was around a lot of people who were pro-life and a lot of Catholics too. And I'd never met Catholics. I'm from a small eastern North Carolina town. So my first encounter was in college, and then when I did an internship in DC. And I really found it compelling, and I really started to then study medieval philosophy, which I found liberating, not confining in any way. And so I think it was an openness to truth in general, is how I felt about it at that time, and that's where it led me. It led me in those two places. I was pro-life before I was Catholic. So that, yeah, because it was a very, it's a very defined but robust argument, and it engages your mind in a lot of categories. What is the nature of a human being? When does a human being begin? Are you body, mind, soul, or are you just body? You know, a lot of these things are relevant to not only the abortion issue, but what you think about the cosmos. One thing I should mention too is I remember you said what was the thing, and there are a lot of things, of course, when your mind changes like that, but I do remember one particular point in college where I could not get to what do I think that thing is. Like, thing that you're talking about taking out, you know. But I did become very worried that it might be something that had a moral character, a moral being, that might be the equivalent of a death for you and I. And at that point, I really thought, you know, I would not walk into a dark room with a gun, not knowing if there were other people in the room or not. And so it really became, even if it's possible, it seems like we as a society shouldn't take that chance. And of course, it grew from there. It became a stronger conviction that the two people involved in every abortion have equal rights.
Since you came from the other side,
yeah,
there was at one point in this country a very robust common ground movement,
mm-hmm.
which started, as far as I can tell, 20 or more years ago, and has pretty much fizzled out to nothing at this point. Do you believe there is any common ground on the abortion issue?
I do. I really do. Clearly, there's not common ground on the two extremes. Where I would include myself in a very strongly committed group, but smaller group that says there are two people in every abortion. This is a human rights issue for both. On the other extreme, there's only one human being to consider. The other is just a part of her body, and so it's really not that much of a conversation. That's a small group. But so much in the middle, there is so much that we do agree on. One is that a woman in crisis needs our help. Two, there are so many abortions that the vast majority of Americans agree that should not be allowed. So I think there's a lot of, there is a category, late-term abortions, that is common ground without question. There's also common ground about a lot of issues that surround the question of abortion. So who pays for it? Who needs to sign off for a minor abortion? Should there be, for medical abortions that are at home and you're doing abortion through pills, should there be oversight by a physician, or should it just be a completely alone place where you're doing this?
Have you been able to come together with pro-choice leaders and turn some of those common areas of agreement into law?
I think because the pro-choice camp has everything to lose, meaning they've got Roe versus Wade and legal abortion up until birth, the way Hillary Clinton put it, the unborn child has no rights up until birth. That's that position. Everything that changes from that point is a loss for them.
But there's already been a lot of loss for them since the Roe v. Wade decision was handed down.
There has been.
When there was basically pretty much unfettered ability to have an abortion. Since then, of course, states have put in 24-hour waiting periods and judicial approval for teenagers, all the clinic regulations about clinics having to meet hospital construction regulations, all those sorts of things. Yeah. It's very different what is legal under many states' laws now versus the early 70s right after Roe.
Those laws that you're referring to that have been upheld by the courts, they represent a loss for the pro-choice movement. So if we're talking about coming to common ground between pro-life and pro-choice leaders, you don't come into that thinking that a loss would be common ground. Those were all considered a loss for them. And so I think it makes it very hard. I am opposed to abortions after 5 months. Now, I'm opposed to all of them, but I'm also opposed to them after 5 months. And that would be an obvious common ground place, but that would be considered a loss a gain for us, gain for the pro-life movement, but a loss for the pro-choice movement.
You're talking about the Supreme Court ruling instead of the trimester, that there's an absolute state interest after 5 months, meaning the pro-choice movement would give up the ability to have on a state law basis that they could not, the state could absolutely ban abortion even in the case of the life of the mother after 5 months.
Yeah, though there are 20 states that have that law on the books after 5 months, and they make exceptions for life of the mother and some for rape and incest. So that is something that we work very hard to pass, and we're working for that on the federal level to pass, and we embed that in our election strategy. when you're talking about common ground, the pro-choice movement does not consider that common ground. They consider that an infringement upon the rights of women, because frankly, it makes rational sense. If it is true that this is not a baby, then it is outrageous that we would do that. It makes no sense. If there is a baby, then clearly there's something more. So your question I find really compelling, having come from the other side to this side of the issue, and can't there be some common ground? I feel the same way between the Episcopal Church and the Catholic Church very often. And so it grieves me that there hasn't been, and I don't think that it's inevitable that it has to fizzle out over time. But we do have to come up with things that both sides feel there's a win. And I think serving women in crisis pregnancy, helping them have their children if they so choose, is one of those common grounds. I think that we could do that for women and set aside our differences.
Do you ever get death threats?
Yes. You know, if you're in the underbelly of the Twitter world like I am, yeah, I don't take it seriously.
But not, it sounds like not constantly. And
while I take it seriously in terms of my own safety and my children's safety, I don't walk around worried about it. All
the murders of adult human beings have been done by in other words, that I know of, a pro-choice person has never murdered a pro-life doctor. But it has happened now several times over the last several decades that has, or rifle attacks on clinics and that sort of thing. Why is that?
I don't know why. I think that there is no justification. There is no good reason. I think there are crazy people all over the place, and in every instance that I know of, that has been the case. And those people needed a lot of help before they got to the point of murdering another person in the name of life.
Now you are a founder of the Susan B. Anthony list, right?
Yeah.
What's your biggest achievement?
I think I would say we're living in it right now, which is a pro-life House, a pro-life Senate, and a pro-life administration. We are set up to really make history in terms of the law, in terms of protecting unborn children and their mothers. And you know, I would really love to come back on when we've actually passed a law, that 5-month law. That will be an enormous accomplishment. I think aside from that's the result, but I think what led to that result was helping politicians understand that if you're going to take this position, the pro-life position, you should mean it, you should run on it, and then you should follow through when you get elected. And that is what our whole apparatus at the Susan B. Anthony list has been set up to do. Are you
satisfied with the Republican efforts to make that happen?
I think it has gotten better and better and better, and I think it takes discipline, political discipline, and I think that's what we see ourselves as. We help elect, we embed the policy agenda in the election. After the election, we are there as friends still to say now it's time to follow through on what you said that you believed. And I think that used to be problematic. And I think now, because we are much stronger as a movement and we have the ability to make or break elections, it helps them not only do the right thing in their own mind, but it's the politically smart thing for them to do, to run on this issue and then follow through in legislative action.
You've been quoted in the New Yorker article about you from 2014 as saying, you know, Republicans don't kind of run away from the abortion issue. Has it changed in the last 3 years?
I think yes. I think absolutely yes. I think 2014 was the beginning of that, yes. Those Senate elections that year in 2014 were some of the best that the pro-life movement has ever embedded itself in, be a part of, and then to see the consequence once they got to the Senate. And I think that, you know, I think about how the pro-choice movement has taken itself very seriously. The dairy supports movement has taken itself seriously. Tobacco industry takes itself seriously. They put a lot of money, a lot of muscle, a lot of action into elections, and then they expect results later. And I would say that the reason that I even began with a group of women, this organization, was to bring at least to parity all of those issues that receive all of that funding and all of that political machine action.
Donald Trump, pro-life
Yes.
president. What do you think of him?
Well, I'll tell you this. He has delivered more than any president so far that was a Republican in the White House. He has delivered more than I thought that any of the primary candidates would have. He has, while I'm surprised, we very much became a part of sealing in those commitments. He's the first president to actually make concrete commitments on this and then to immediately begin to follow through. Having said that, he was far and away my last choice. But we did what we always do in good politics and good political discipline requires, and that is that you get every single primary candidate solidly committed, and including him. And then when time comes for the general election, and you have two candidates, you must choose if you're going to be in it. So the discipline part of that means that those commitments, and we have a great letter, which was the central organizing document of our whole campaign, a letter of commitments that he was a stipulation for me being his pro-life chair for the battleground states, and it gave us everything we needed. So far, so good. His first 100 days report that we wrote for the pro-life movement was fantastic.
And it doesn't bother you, some of the things that he said about women?
You bet it bothers me. Yes, it does.
How do you wrap your arms around embracing him, given what he said about grabbing women's genitals and all?
There is no excuse for that. I have daughters. Even if I didn't have daughters, I love women. I love myself enough to have the self-respect to hate that. But when it comes down to two people running, arguably, there are character issues on both sides. There are policy decisions that have immense impact for the lives of Americans and certainly unborn Americans. So it had to be a decision about who was going to be able to deliver on that. We were certain what she believed. She was very, very clear what she thought. And he committed the opposite. And so it was very clear in the end that we had a policy choice to make. And that's the basis of making that decision. And so far, I can say that it was the right choice.
Do you call yourself a feminist?
I used to, but I don't as much anymore, because while I embrace the core principles of feminism, it is very difficult to know these days what is a feminist and what brand of feminism we're talking about. I think it's one of the more interesting things that we talk about in the world right now. When there was a split in feminism a couple of decades ago between the feminists who were pro-abortion and pro-pornography, that left a lot of us behind. And I really thought we could fix it. I thought we could kind of bring it back together. One of the reasons that Susan B. Anthony was the name of this organization. But I've just decided to, leave the labels to other people and just try to help women be who they are created to be, and leave it at that.
There are women who call themselves pro-life feminists,
yes.
Correct?
Yes.
Do you endorse them? Do
yes.
you endorse what they're trying to do?
Oh, very
much.
Yeah.
The big women's march in Washington the day after President Trump was inaugurated, there were a sprinkling of women there carrying pro-life feminist
Well, I am
signs.
that pro-life. I am that feminist. I just say I don't use the label, because I find it sometimes is more confusing to people than clarifying. But yes, I very much align. And in fact, the founding of the Susan B. Anthony list was very much within the context of Feminists for Life. And Rachel McNair, who wrote extensively about the early feminists who were pro-life, she was a Quaker, Rachel, and then Helen Alvarez and others who were out there that, it was a lot of women with a lot of divergent views on religion and other types of politics, but were united on this particular belief, and that it was the pro-woman thing to do.
Lawmaking and all that sort of thing, the pro-life movement clearly has it over, as you said, the pro-choice movement is in defensive mode, and the pro-life movement is moving forward toward its goal of banning all abortions. And one thing that I always thought really helped turn that battleship around was the sonogram.
Oh yeah, I think.
Tell me about that.
Yeah, I think the theoretical argument, like I was describing in philosophy and all that, what is a human being, what is the nature of humanity, and those are compelling arguments and compelling conversations, but there is nothing more riveting than seeing a baby on a sonogram. It makes the pro-choice movement stutter to see it. And they're very concerned, as they should be, and I would have been a long time ago, that the reason we're on offense and they're on defense is because the humanization of that entity is really come around. It is not just a humanization, and people look at that and see that that's human. And anybody who wants their pregnancy, wants the child that is growing, will look at WebMD every month and find all kinds of information about what you should be doing. You should be singing to your child at 4.5 months. They know your voice. You should be, that's when their eyebrows start to come in and you can see it. So, visuals aren't everything, but there's certainly a lot, and there's certainly a lot in this day and age. And that has really, if nothing had been done, and medical science had just kept at pace, we would still be at a place of going on offense right now.
And that is clearly a place where technology was on your side.
Indeed, it was. And
however, technology has also turned against you more recently with abortifacients, with the invention of abortifacients, which allow women in the privacy of their homes to terminate pregnancies with prescription medications. And now so many abortions are not taking place in clinics, but they're taking place with medications that women can buy, in some cases, over the counter. Tell me about how that's affected your movement.
Yeah, it is, first of all, I think the saddest turn of events for women, alone in their apartment or wherever they are in a bathroom, going through all the things that you do, that even pro-choice people acknowledge that it is often emotionally riveting time. Whether they saw a sonogram or not, they know that this is not a self-appendectomy. It's an abortion, and it involves probably maybe another person. You're all alone. You have no support emotionally. You also have no support medically if something goes wrong. A telephone is not a good substitute for attending physician. So I think it's also not. I know that it's not responsible medically, and it's not compassionate on an empathy basis. But you ask, what does that mean for our movement? It means that our movement needs to be very serious about stopping abortion at certain stages.
Even 2 weeks, 4 weeks.
Well, I mean,
into
at
a
least
pregnancy.
I mean, at least now where we are now. I mean, in terms of its effect on our ability to achieve success, it's devastating, because you could close down every Planned Parenthood. You can do all this, and then the demand will just shift to a different place, a different institution, your own home, somewhere else. So the help that women need and the laws that are needed to protect unborn children need to be getting in at least parity with the rest of the world. Right now, we're one of 7 nations that fails to outlaw abortion after 5 months. And our partners in this are Vietnam, North Korea, China, Canada. That's not great. It's not great company. We've got some work to do. So when you remind me of that, I think of it as a great grief. It's a great sadness, and I think that there will be a backlash among women over time, but not right now.
With Justice Gorsuch on the court, do you see the Supreme Court, when the right case comes along, overturning Roe v. Wade? Roe
has been sort of falling apart at the core for a long time already, and it is not because, think of it, the Troutmaster system is really not even the language of the court anymore, of the Supreme Court or any court. It's viability. And so Roe has kind of already been morphed into Roe plus viability. But even viability changes about every decade, about a week. So that's a shifting standard that is hard to argue that that's a good legal standard, something that shifts all along. So you're talking about viability with medical intervention? Correct, okay. Right. So could live even with medical intervention. Right. Do you think we'll get to the point where, for example, medical intervention could save
zygotes?
Never, don't want to ever say never, because then the next day you find out something on it. Someone tweets out some great new, incredible thing.
Well, thank you so much for your time, Marjorie. This has been extremely enlightening. And that's it for this edition of To the Contrary. Please follow me on Twitter and visit our website, pbs.org/To the Contrary. And whether you agree or think to the contrary, see you next week.